If you like this video, please hit the red subscribe button now. In the vast and remote Ural Mountains of the Soviet Union, a terrible event occurred. It was a nuclear disaster of immense scale. Yet for decades the world knew nothing of it. This was the Kishtim disaster. It happened at a secret facility called the Mayak Production Association. This complex was one of the cornerstones of the Soviet nuclear weapons program. Its primary purpose was to produce plutonium, a key ingredient for atomic bombs. The relentless pressure of the Cold War arms race meant that production was paramount. Safety, unfortunately, was often a secondary concern in this hidden corner of the world. The Mayak plant was built in a hurry after the Second World War. The Soviet Union was desperate to catch up with the United States in nuclear capability. Engineers and scientists built reactors and processing plants to create weapons-grade material. The town built to house the workers, known as Chelyabinsk 40, later Ozersk, was a closed city. It did not appear on any maps. Its residents' existence was a state secret. They lived in a world detached from the rest of the country, all in service of a single monumental goal: building the bomb. This secrecy would later play a crucial role in concealing the disaster. The process of creating plutonium generates enormous amounts of highly radioactive waste. The fateful day was September 29, 1957. It began like any other day at the Mayak complex. Workers went about their duties, unaware of the immense danger brewing beneath their feet. Deep underground, a concrete-encased steel tank, designated Tank 14, held about 80 tons of highly radioactive liquid waste. For over a year, the cooling system for this particular tank had been malfunctioning. The intricate network of pipes designed to circulate cooling water had failed, and repairing it was deemed too difficult and dangerous. The authorities decided to simply stop using it, leaving the radioactive contents to heat up unchecked. As the weeks and months passed, the temperature inside Tank 14 steadily climbed. The radioactive decay of the nuclear waste produced a tremendous amount of heat. The water in the waste solution began to evaporate, leaving behind a volatile mixture of dried nitrate and acetate salts. By the late afternoon of that September day, the temperature inside the tank reached a critical point, estimated to be around 350 degrees Celsius. A spark, possibly from the monitoring equipment itself, ignited the dried explosive salts. The result was a massive chemical explosion, not a nuclear one, but one with devastating radioactive consequences. The force of the blast was enormous. It was estimated to have the power of about 70 to 100 tons of TNT. It blew apart the 160-ton concrete lid that covered the storage tank, hurling it into the air. A towering column of smoke and dust, filled with deadly radioactive particles, rose more than a kilometer into the sky. The explosion destroyed the storage facility and scattered contaminated debris across the Mayak plant grounds. They saw a strange, colorful glow in the sky, an aurora-like phenomenon that many admired for its beauty, unaware it was a harbinger of death. The explosion at Mayak released a colossal radioactive plume into the atmosphere. This was not a localized event. The cloud contained an estimated 2 million curies of radioactive isotopes, a significant fraction of the material released during the later Chernobyl disaster. Carried by the prevailing winds, this invisible cloud of poison began to drift towards the northeast. It traveled for hundreds of kilometers, silently blanketing a vast expanse of territory. The trail of contamination it left behind would become known as the East Ural Radioactive Trace, or EURT. It was a permanent scar on the landscape. The radioactive fallout began to settle over fields, forests, lakes, and villages. If you like this video, please hit the red subscribe button now. The fallout contaminated the soil, the water, and every living thing in its path. In the hours and days following the explosion, people in the affected villages noticed a strange, grayish dust settling on their homes and crops. They had no idea what it was. Children played in the streets and farmers continued to work their fields, completely unaware that they were being showered with deadly radioactive particles like cesium-137 and strontium-90. The authorities gave no warning. No information was provided to the public about the nature of the event or the necessary precautions to take. The first attempts at a response were slow and disorganized. About a week to 10 days after the explosion, the first evacuations began. Officials arrived in the most heavily contaminated villages and ordered people to leave their homes immediately. They were told they could take nothing with them: their houses, their livestock, their possessions, everything was to be left behind. These homes were later bulldozed and buried in an attempt to contain the contamination and erase the evidence of the disaster. Over the next 2 years, about 10,000 to 12,000 people were eventually evacuated from 23 different villages within the most contaminated zone. The long-term effects of the Kishtim disaster on the people and the environment were profound and, honestly, just heartbreaking. For those who were not evacuated, life became a slow-motion tragedy. The radioactive isotopes, particularly strontium-90, entered the food chain. Strontium behaves chemically like calcium. It was absorbed by plants. It was eaten by cows. It was concentrated in their milk. It then accumulated in the bones of the people who drank that milk and ate local produce, especially children. This internal radiation exposure led to a terrifying increase in chronic illnesses and long-term health problems for thousands of people. The health consequences were devastating. Doctors in the region began to observe a dramatic rise in cancer rates, leukemia, birth defects. They saw people suffering from what came to be known as chronic radiation sickness, characterized by a weakened immune system, persistent fatigue, and a host of other debilitating symptoms. Yet these doctors were forbidden from diagnosing their patients with radiation-related illnesses. The official cause of death was always listed as something else. The state enforced a medical cover-up to match the political one, leaving countless victims to suffer and die without any official acknowledgement of the true cause of their suffering. The environment in the East Ural radioactive trace became one of the most contaminated places on the planet. The land was rendered unusable for agriculture, forests died, trees showed bizarre mutations and stunted growth. That phenomenon led to the area being nicknamed the Red Forest. Rivers and lakes were poisoned for generations. The Soviet authorities eventually designated a large area as a nature reserve, not to protect nature, but to keep people out and prevent them from witnessing the devastating effects of the radiation on the ecosystem. The disaster's legacy is carried in the genes of the population, with a higher incidence of genetic mutations passed down through generations. The primary reason the Kishtim disaster remained a secret for so long was the intense paranoia and obsession with secrecy that defined the Soviet Union during the Cold War. The Mayak plant was at the very heart of their most sensitive project, the development of nuclear weapons. Admitting that a catastrophic accident at such a facility was simply unthinkable. It would have been a massive propaganda victory for the United States, revealing a technological failure and a disregard for human life within the supposedly superior Soviet system. The Soviet government went to extraordinary lengths to conceal the disaster from the outside world and even from its own citizens. All information related to the incident was classified as a top state secret. The affected region was sealed off. The closed city of Chelyabinsk 40 was erased from all maps and official documents. The thousands of people who were evacuated were resettled and sworn to secrecy, threatened with severe punishment if they ever spoke of what had happened. For decades, the disaster existed only as whispers and rumors, a ghost story told by those who had lived it, but with no official confirmation. The first hints of the disaster reached the West through intelligence channels and scientific monitoring. In the years following 1957, American scientists noted an absence of Soviet scientific papers on the ecological effects of radiation, which they found suspicious. Then, in 1976, a dissident Soviet biologist named Zoris Medvedev, living in exile in London, published an article that described a major nuclear accident in the Ural Mountains. His claims were initially met with skepticism by many in the Western nuclear establishment, who found it hard to believe an event of such magnitude could be kept hidden for so long. It was not until 1989, under Mikhail Gorbachev's policy of glasnost, or openness, that the Soviet Union finally admitted the truth. They officially acknowledged that a major radiation accident had occurred at Kishtim in 1957. This stunning admission, made 32 years after the event, finally lifted the veil of secrecy. It allowed scientists and journalists to access the region and begin to piece together the full, horrific story. The Kishtim disaster stands as a chilling testament to the dangers of unchecked state power and the immense human cost of secrecy, reminding us that some of the world's greatest catastrophes can be hidden from view, but their devastating consequences can never truly be erased. If you like this video, please hit the red subscribe button now.